This letter was discovered folded inside the lining of a worn leather trunk, buried beneath a collapsed big top in rural Tennessee, dated autumn of 1932. If you are reading this, then the rain has stopped and I have not. My name is Edmund Calloway, and I have painted my face every single day for 31 years. 31 years of red mouths stretched wide over whatever grief sat beneath them. 31 years of falling down on purpose so that others might rise in their seats, rise in their laughter, rise above whatever darkness followed them through the canvas gates of Hargrove's Grand American Circus. I never once asked them to think about what followed me home. Tonight I am writing this by the light of a single candle stub, seated on an overturned bucket in what remains of my dressing tent. The wind is something terrible out there. It moves through the gap in the canvas like a living thing, like something that has come specifically to find me. The whole fairground smells of wet straw and animal fear, and that particular rot that settles into everything when a circus has been camped too long in one miserable place. We have been in Harlan County 3 weeks now. 3 weeks too long, most of us would say, though nobody says it loudly enough for Mr. Hargrove to hear. The date, as best I can reckon, is the 14th of October. The year is 1932, and if you do not know what that means for men like me, for all of us out here on the road, then you have been living somewhere far kinder than this earth. America is broken. I have watched it breaking from the back of a wagon, town by town, county by county. I have driven through cities where the men stand in lines stretching around entire blocks, their hats in their hands, their eyes holding that particular shade of emptiness that I know too well. I have seen children watching our parade from the roadside with bare feet in October mud, and I have thrown them hard candies from my coat pocket because it was the only thing I had to give. And then I painted my face that night, and I fell down in the sawdust ring, and I made their fathers laugh, and I told myself that was enough. I told myself that laughter was a form of bread. I am no longer sure I believe that. My canvas walls are shaking. I can hear the big cats somewhere to my left, Raja and the 2 lionesses pacing in their wagon cages the way they always do before a bad storm. Animals know. Lord, they always know before the rest of us are willing to admit it. Benny, our elephant keeper, told me once that Sadie, our old Indian elephant, 40 years old if she's a day, that Sadie had begun pulling at her stake chains 2 hours before the great flood in Natchez back in 27. Nobody listened then either. I should have listened to Sadie tonight. The trouble began at the evening performance, the second show. We were perhaps 40 minutes in. Georgie the ringmaster had just introduced Madame Celestine's aerial act. She works the silk ribbons 40 feet up with no net, the most fearless woman I have ever had the privilege of knowing when I heard the first sound. It was not thunder exactly, it was lower than thunder. It was the kind of sound that does not come from the sky at all, but from the ground beneath you. A sound like the earth clearing its throat. I was standing at the performer's entrance, still in full costume, the oversized checked trousers, the orange wig, the cracked shoes that flap at the toe like a laughing mouth, waiting for my cue for the automobile gag. The automobile gag is the finale of my act. 7 clowns emerge from a motorcar approximately the size of a child's toy. The audience never tires of it. I have done it 900 times if I have done it once, and I still hear the gasp every time that 4th body emerges, and then the 5th, and the 6th. It is the one moment in this life when I feel genuinely magical, when I feel that I am giving something real. I never got my cue. What happened next came fast and slow at the same time, the way catastrophe always does. I have been told that the main support pole on the eastern side had been weakened. Sal Benedetti, our rigger, had flagged it 3 days prior and filed a complaint with Hargrove's man, a weasel-faced accountant named Pruitt, who manages costs the way a miser manages pennies, which is to say, he manages them above all other considerations, including human ones. The repair was deemed too expensive. We were only in Harlan County 3 more days, Pruitt said. It would hold 3 more days, Pruitt said. It held 2. I heard the crack first, a sound like a rifle shot, sharp and final, and then the canvas above the eastern bleachers began to descend, slowly at first, with an almost graceful quality, like a curtain at the end of a grand performance, and then all at once, all of it, the whole trembling cathedral of canvas and rope and timber, came down upon 530 people who had paid 35 cents each to forget, for 1 hour, that the world had gone to ruin. I did not run. I want you to understand that. I have thought about it in the hours since, sitting here with this candle and this paper, and I truly believe that I did not freeze out of cowardice. I stood at that entrance because I knew the ring. I knew every inch of that sawdust floor, in the dark, in the chaos, in the screaming. I had walked it 10,000 times, and so I went in. I went in because there were children in those seats. The screaming, I cannot describe it fully and remain the man I am. I will only say that there is a sound a crowd makes when fear takes them all at once that is unlike any other sound on this earth. It is not a collection of individual voices. It becomes one voice, one enormous, ancient voice, and it was dark, almost entirely dark, because when the pole came down it took the electric lines with it, and the only light came from the entrance lanterns and from the small fires where the lanterns had fallen onto the hay. I pulled 3 people out before the second collapse. Sonnet 4.6. I want to be precise here. I'll continue directly as part 2 of Edmund's letter, picking up from where we left off. I do not know how long I was inside before the second collapse came. Time moves differently in catastrophe. It stretches and compresses like taffy pulled between 2 hands, and you cannot trust it. What I know is this. I had pulled out a woman in a yellow dress whose leg was pinned beneath a section of fallen bleacher timber, and a boy of perhaps 9 or 10 who was conscious but silent in that terrible way that children sometimes go silent when the world has shown them something it should not have shown them yet, and an old man. I do not know his name. He had lost his hat and his glasses, and he kept asking me about his glasses, kept saying, "Clara gave me those glasses, son. I cannot lose those glasses," and I kept telling him we would find them. We would find them, even as I dragged him toward the entrance light, and we both knew we would not find them, that they were gone, that a great many things were gone tonight that could not be recovered. Then the second collapse came, and the entrance was no longer where it had been. I want to stop here and tell you something about darkness. Real darkness. The kind that is total and absolute, the kind with weight to it. It does something to a man's mind that ordinary fear does not do. Ordinary fear has a shape. You can see the thing that frightens you, and the seeing of it, however terrible, gives you something to push against. But darkness without shape, darkness that presses against your open eyes like a hand, darkness full of sound and heat and the smell of burning canvas and other men's blood, that darkness reaches into the oldest part of you, the part that existed before language, the part that knows, in its deepest animal certainty, that you are small and the world is not. I crouched in that darkness and I breathed, and I waited for my eyes to find something, anything, the faintest thread of light, the dimmest suggestion of an opening. And while I waited, I heard things I will carry with me for whatever time I have left. I heard a woman praying in a language I did not recognize. I heard a child calling for someone named Daddy with the patient, rhythmic persistence of a child who has not yet learned that calling does not always bring the one you call. I heard somewhere above and to my left the sound of one of the big cats. I cannot tell you which one. The sound was not a roar. It was quieter than that, more intimate. A sound I can only describe as grief, though I know that is not a scientific word for what animals feel. But I have lived among animals my entire adult life, and I will tell you plainly that what I heard in that darkness from that cage was grief. I found an opening in the canvas with my hands, a tear perhaps 2 feet wide where the fabric had split along an old seam. I pushed through it on my belly like a man being born in reverse, coming not into the world but out of a particular corner of it, and I came out into the rain on the eastern side of the collapsed tent, and I lay there on the wet ground for what felt like a long time, and I looked up at the sky. It was the kind of October sky that has no stars, just cloud, grey upon grey, and rain coming down in thin cold needles, and the smell of smoke from somewhere, and the sound of voices, many voices, organizing themselves slowly out of chaos into something resembling purpose. I could hear men shouting to each other. I could hear what sounded like a motor car arriving. I could hear Benny somewhere close, calling to Sadie, speaking to her in that low private register he reserves for when she is distressed, a voice so tender it has always seemed to me the truest voice of any man I know. I lay there and I breathed the cold rain and I thought about my mother. This surprised me. In moments of extremity I have always assumed I would think about the grand things, God perhaps, or the accumulated meaning of a life, or whatever philosophical framework a man constructs to make sense of his time on earth. But it was my mother I thought of. Specifically, I thought of her kitchen in the house in Zanesville, Ohio, where I grew up, the third of 5 children, and the particular quality of light that came through her kitchen window on winter mornings, that pale winter Ohio light that falls across a wooden table like something almost holy. She kept a blue pitcher on that table, always filled with something, milk or water, or in summer, a lemonade so tart it made your whole face participate. I have not been home in 11 years. My mother will be 67 years old this coming March. I do not know if she thinks about me. We did not part on warm terms, she and I. She had wanted for me the things that mothers want: stability, proximity, a trade with a future, a wife, grandchildren close enough to visit on Sundays. What she got instead was a son who ran away with a circus at the age of 19 because, and how do I explain this to a woman like my mother, a woman whose entire philosophy of life was organized around the principle of remaining, because I could not stay still, because something in me needed the road the way a river needs its banks, not to be contained by them but to move against them, to be defined by the moving. I became a clown because the first time I made a tent full of strangers laugh, I understood something I had never understood before. I understood that I was capable of changing the interior weather of other human beings, that I could walk into a space where people sat with all their private sorrows, their debts, their disappointments, their quietly desperate lives, and for 10 minutes, for 15, I could lift those sorrows up out of them like a magician pulling scarves from a pocket. They would leave lighter than they came. I gave them that. I did that. And yet, I am 50 years old, and I sleep in a cot in a canvas tent, and I own 2 suits of clothes and a leather trunk with a broken latch. I have no wife. I have no children. I have no kitchen window with winter light coming through it. I have painted my face so many times that sometimes, in the mornings when I look in the small mirror nailed to my tent pole, I expect to see the paint still there. I expect to see the red smile. I have worn it so long I am no longer entirely certain where it ends, and I begin. Tonight it is washed away. The rain took it when I crawled through the canvas. I checked, pressing my fingers to my cheeks in the dark, and they came away with just the faintest trace of red, pale as a memory. For the first time in perhaps a decade, my face in the dark is simply my face. I do not know how I feel about that. I came back to my dressing tent because there was nowhere else to go, and because my legs had begun to shake in the particular way they do when the body has spent its courage and is now presenting the invoice. I found this paper, I found this pencil, I found the candle stub, and I am using it now, and I am aware that it will not last much longer. Outside, the situation is still unfolding. I can hear it. There are more motor cars now. I can see their headlamps sweeping past the gap in my tent flap. And I believe the sheriff's office has been called, and perhaps a doctor, though what one doctor is meant to do for 530 people, I cannot imagine. I heard someone say the number 14 a few minutes ago in a tone of voice that made my stomach close like a fist. I do not know what that number means. I am afraid I know what that number means. Georgie Beaumont, who has been our ringmaster for 6 years, and who is the finest ringmaster I have ever worked with, a man with a voice like the inside of a cathedral, and a laugh that could reorganize a room. I have not seen Georgie since before the collapse. He was in the ring when it happened. He was always in the ring. It was the place he loved best in all the world. He told me once, over a bottle of something awful in a diner in Baton Rouge, that the moment the ring lights came up and the crowd went quiet and he raised the microphone to his lips, he felt, in that precise instant, more alive than at any other point in his living, more present, more himself. I hope he is alive. I hope he is standing somewhere out there in the rain, his red coat soaked through, his tall hat crushed, telling someone in that magnificent voice that everything is going to be all right. He was always better at that than me. I was always better at the falling down. My candle is burning very low now. The wax has pooled on the bucket lid, and it smells of tallow and something faintly sweet that I cannot identify. The rain has not stopped. If anything, it is coming harder, drumming on my tent roof with a sound like an audience that will not quiet. The wind has found new gaps. I am cold in a way that has moved past discomfort into something more philosophical. I keep thinking about the boy I pulled out, the silent one. He had brown eyes, I remember, even in the dark. I remember his eyes catching some thread of firelight when I lifted him. He was wearing a coat 2 sizes too large, the sleeves rolled back, which meant it was borrowed or inherited, which meant his family did not have the money for a coat that fit, which meant his parents had saved and scrimped and set aside those 35 cents specifically, deliberately, as an act of love to bring this boy to the circus on a Friday night in October, to give him one bright hour inside a canvas world where impossible things happened and nobody suffered and the little man in the funny shoes always got back up. I would like to know his name. I would like to know that he is warm somewhere, that someone has found him, that someone is with him. I think that is perhaps the thing I am most afraid of. Not the darkness, not the cold, not whatever that number 14 meant when I heard it carried on the wet night air. I am afraid of the boy sitting alone somewhere in the rain, in a coat too large for him, watching the lights of the motorcars sweep past, and not understanding what has happened to the world tonight, waiting for someone to come and explain it to him in a way that does not destroy something essential in him. I was that boy once. Someone came for me. Eventually someone always came. Outside I can hear a new sound now. Beneath the rain, beneath the voices, beneath the distant restless grief of the caged animals. It is a sound I cannot immediately place, and then I can, and the recognition of it moves through me like cold water. It is the sound of the big top canvas, what remains of it, shifting in the wind. It sounds, God help me, like applause. Sonnet 4.6, continuing Edmund's letter, part 3. I have been sitting here long enough now that the candle has burned itself down to nothing. I am writing this final portion in the dark, by feel alone, pressing hard enough with the pencil that I hope the words will be legible when the light finds them again, if the light finds them again. My letters are likely wandering across the page like a man without a lantern crossing an unfamiliar field. I apologize for that. I was never a particularly elegant writer, even in good conditions. 31 years among circus folk does not cultivate penmanship, it cultivates other things. Endurance mostly. The particular endurance of people who have chosen a life that the rest of the world considers slightly unreal. The rain is still coming down. I believe it has been 4 hours now since the collapse, though I cannot be certain. My pocket watch stopped sometime during those first terrible minutes inside the tent. I do not know how, whether it was struck against something or whether the mechanism simply decided, as mechanisms sometimes do, that it had measured enough of this particular night and wished to be done with it. I understand the feeling. The voices outside have changed in character. In the first hour they were urgent, frantic, full of that particular human energy that catastrophe produces, that strange electricity of people discovering they are capable of more than they believed. I have seen it before in smaller emergencies on the road. A wagon overturned, an animal loose in a town, a fire in the cook tent. People surprise themselves. They reach down into some reserve they did not know they were carrying, and they find, to their own astonishment, that they are brave. It is one of the few genuinely beautiful things about human beings, and I have always loved them for it. Now the voices are quieter, more organized but more sorrowful. That is the second phase. The electricity has discharged itself, and what remains is the long, exhausting work of understanding what has happened, and beginning, in whatever halting way is possible, to live with it. I heard Pruitt's voice a little while ago. The accountant. He was arguing with someone, a local official, I believe, a man whose voice carried the particular flat authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in small rooms. Pruitt was explaining, justifying, using words like unforeseen and structural assessment and acts of God, and each word was a small, precise instrument designed to create distance between himself and the evening's events. I have known men like Pruitt my entire life. I grew up in a county full of them. Men who have developed the remarkable ability to stand at the edge of a disaster they helped create and look at it with the expression of a concerned bystander. I wanted to go out there. I want you to know that. I wanted to walk out of this tent in the dark and the rain with my washed face and my cracked flapping shoes, and I wanted to say something to Pruitt that would mean something, that would land on him the way real things land. But I did not go. My legs have made their position clear on the matter of standing. And perhaps more honestly, I have learned in 50 years that the Pruitts of this world are largely impervious to the words of clowns. We are not, in their architecture of consequence, the kind of people whose words carry weight. We are entertainment. We are a line item. We are the thing that happens before the real act. So I stayed in my tent and I kept writing, because this is the only thing I have left tonight that feels like an act of will. Let me tell you about the circus, not the disaster, not the collapse and the screaming and the 14. I heard the number confirmed an hour ago, spoken clearly, and I sat with it for a long time, and I am still sitting with it. and I expect I will sit with it for the remainder of whatever life is allotted to me. Let me tell you instead about the circus as I have known it and loved it, because I think it deserves to exist somewhere in full, in someone's account, before it is reduced only to the catastrophe that ended it. Hargrove's Grand American Circus was, at its best, a genuinely miraculous thing. I want you to understand what it meant to drive a wagon into a small town in 1932, to come in at dawn before the town had fully woken, and begin the raising of the tents while the mist was still on the fields. There is a specific silence to circus morning that I have never been able to adequately describe. The animals are quiet. The performers are moving efficiently, purposefully, in that practiced way of people who have done the same physical sequence so many times that the body knows it without consultation from the mind. The canvas goes up slowly, like something breathing, and then by mid-morning, there it is, this city, this impossible temporary city of color and noise, existing where 6 hours ago there was only a field. I have watched children stand at the edge of the fairground and look at it with a quality of attention that I can only describe as reverence. Not the frantic excitement of children in ordinary circumstances, something stiller than that, something older, as if some part of them recognized, at a level beneath conscious understanding, that what they were seeing was a kind of answer to a question they had carried without knowing it. The question that every human being carries somewhere, I think. The question of whether the world contains somewhere something larger and stranger and more colored than the daily evidence suggests. We were that answer. That was what we were. Madame Celestine. I should tell you about her, because she deserves to exist in someone's account too. Her real name was Pearl Hutchins, and she grew up in a mill town in North Carolina, and she taught herself to climb using the rafters of her father's textile factory, because there was, she told me once, a window up near the roof that looked out over the mountains, and it was the only window in the entire building that could see past the town, and she needed to see past the town. She is 34 years old. She has been with Hargroves 11 years. Every night she climbs 40 feet into the air on silk ribbons, and she does things that should not be physically possible for a human body, and she comes back down, and every night without exception, when she reaches the ground she looks surprised, as if she cannot quite believe she has been permitted to do this, as if she is waiting for someone to tell her that the window with the view of the mountains is not actually for her. I do not know where Pearl is tonight. I do not know where any of them are. Georgie and Pearl and Benny and Sal and the Marchetti brothers who do the tumbling act, and old Rosa who runs the cookhouse and has kept this company fed and more or less alive through 7 states and 4 years of Depression-era economics through a combination of genius and stubbornness that I consider one of the authentic wonders I have personally witnessed. I do not know if they are safe. I do not know if they are whole. I know that I am still here, for now, still here in this tent with my dead candle and my wandering pencil and the rain on the roof that has not stopped. I want to write to my mother. I want to tell her. I have been composing it in my head for the past hour. The letter I would write if this were a different kind of letter. If I were writing it in ordinary circumstances from an ordinary evening. I would tell her about the blue picture. I would tell her that I have thought about that kitchen window more times than she could know, that the image of that particular winter light on that particular wooden table has followed me through 31 years and 900 towns and more miles than I can calculate, and that it has been, without my ever telling her, a kind of compass, that when I was lost, and I have been lost, more times than the road would suggest, more times than the painted smile would indicate, I found my way back to that light in my mind and held it until I could breathe again. I would tell her that I am sorry for the ways I was not what she needed, that I know she did not understand the choice I made, and that I understand why she did not understand it, and that both of these things can be true simultaneously, that a man can love his mother completely and still need to leave, that leaving is not always abandonment. Sometimes leaving is the only honest thing. I would tell her about the boy with the brown eyes and the coat too large for him, and I would tell her that pulling him out of that darkness tonight felt more like the thing I was put here to do than anything I have managed in 50 years, more than the gags, more than the automobile and the 7 clowns and the 900 gasps, that perhaps the whole long, ridiculous journey of my life, the orange wig and the painted mouth and the cracked, flapping shoes and all the falling down, all the deliberate, dignified falling down, perhaps all of it was practice for one dark night in a collapsed tent in Harlan County, Kentucky, when a silent boy with borrowed coat needed someone who knew the ring. I would like to believe that. I am trying to believe it. The voices outside are fewer now. The rain is the dominant sound again, steady and indifferent, the way rain always is. The way nature always is, carrying on its own enormous business with complete disregard for the small catastrophes of the small creatures moving across its surface. I do not say that bitterly. I have always found it strangely a comfort. The indifference of rain, the indifference of stars when there are stars. It means that the universe is not arranged against you specifically, that your suffering, however real, is not being authored by something. It simply is. It is weather. You move through it. I can hear very faintly now the sound of a motorcar engine turning over somewhere on the far side of the grounds. People leaving, people with somewhere to go. People to whom tonight is something that happened, a horror they will carry home in their mouths like a stone, something to set on the table and examine in the morning light, and slowly, over weeks and months, incorporate into the larger story of their lives. For some of them it will become the most important night of their lives, the night that divided everything into before and after. I know this because I have had such nights. We all have. The nights that reach into you and rearrange the furniture. I hope they find something worth keeping in it. I hope that boy with the brown eyes finds, someday, when he is a man sitting in his own kitchen, with his own particular winter light coming through his own particular window, I hope he finds that tonight gave him something. Not the terror, not the darkness. Something smaller, some knowledge of himself that he did not have before, some thread of proof that the world, for all its capacity to fall down without warning, also contains people who will come into the dark after you. I have very little left to say, and the pencil is growing short. I am tired in a way that seems to go below the body, below the muscles and the cold and the shaking legs. It is a tiredness of a different kind entirely. The kind that comes not from exertion, but from having looked at something clearly, having seen for one long rain-soaked night exactly what this life has been and what it has not been, and what it might have been if I had been braver in the ways that matter, and less brave in the ways that were simply habit dressed up as courage. I want to get up. I want to walk out of this tent and into the rain and find whoever needs finding and do whatever needs doing. I believe I will when I have finished this letter. I believe my legs will agree to cooperate. I believe morning is not entirely far away, though the darkness makes it feel impossible. But there is something else now, something I have not mentioned because I was not certain of it until just now, until this moment, sitting in the dark with the pencil nearly gone. There is a smell, not the rain, not the animals, not the wet straw or the tallow from the candle or the sawdust or the particular smell of canvas that has been my home and my world and my atmosphere for 3 decades. Something else, something that is finding its way through the gap in my tent with a quiet, persuasive patience. Smoke. Not the small smoke of the fallen lanterns, which has long since been dealt with. Something larger, something that has been building somewhere on the grounds, gathering itself, making its slow decisions. I am putting this letter in the lining of my trunk, which is the safest place I know. If you have found it there, then you have found it in the one place I thought to leave something true. I have spent 31 years making people believe that the man who falls down will always get back up. I am going now to find out whether I still believe it myself.